Oh, look, I can't help but to ask myself, what the hell happened to the band Creed? If you were listening to a rock station in your local city or town, or even one of those stations for myself in Houston, I know they had one of those music stations that plays pop music, but they'll transition into what I'll call light rock. I'm talking about bands like the Goo Goo Dolls, Tonic, Nickelback. They would combine the different sounds and the different musics. Didn't matter, but in the end, between 1999, 2003, I guarantee if you flipped it on one of those stations, you were guaranteed to hear a Creed song being shoved down your throat. Even though their first album was released in 1997. When Scott Stapp and Mark Tremonti met each other while attending FSU in the early 90s, they became buds and they became friends. Reason being, they both had a mutual love for music, for writing music, for playing music, and most bands, that's usually how it starts. Like I said before, there was that 4 or 5 year stretch where you always heard Creed, and most of that success was because of their second studio album, Human Clay. Now, their first studio album, released in 1997, My Own Prison, it had some good songs on it, and it was played on the radio, but it didn't blow them up like their second album. But this first album, because of the success of their second album and everything beyond, that album and those songs grew in popularity as the band grew. You know, it's kind of funny to think of it now, but when Creed released their first album, My Own Prison, it's 3 singles. The first 3 singles off the album. The title of the album was the first single, the song My Own Prison, and then you had What's This Life For and One. Now, critics and all those music people out there, they were labeling Creed based on these songs, based on this sound. They were comparing them to bands at that time like Alice in Chains, Soundgarden, Pearl Jam. Now, again, hindsight's 2020. It seems kind of funny now because we know that's not what Creed was. They weren't a grunge band. They weren't even really a post-grunge band. They were just Creed. Now, Creed was never really a Christian band, contrary to popular belief. Now, their beliefs, their religious beliefs, did show up in their music, especially because of Scott. Scott Stapp's stepfather, who raised him, was a minister. So he grew up in the church. Now, especially on their first album, you listen to the lyrics, you hear their beliefs being spewed out through their lyrics. And I don't mean spewed out in a disrespectful way. I mean, it was obvious they wanted to share some of their beliefs and some of the religious speakings, I would say. But it definitely came through in that first album more than any other album beyond. So in 1999, Creed released their second album, Human Clay. Now, this was the album right here that put them on the map, so to speak. Now, I swear, I could not get into a car and not hear. Then, if I was not hearing that, I was definitely hearing this. So those 2 songs and this album definitely put Creed on the, I guess you could say, the map, so to speak. This definitely put them out there. People knew who they were more than anything, more than their first album, even though, like I said, their first album was a success in the sense that if any band does a first album, if you could get the success that Creed had on theirs, you call it a success. But definitely, Human Clay put Creed out there, and the guys were on top of the world at that time, and they were riding high. So 2001 saw Creed release their third studio album, Withered. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. Even there was some songs on there that I liked. Some of the singles. Not a lot of the album I like, but some of the singles, like My Sacrifice and One Last Breath, I think they were all right songs. And I'll listen to this day. More of a nostalgia effect, but I will listen to them. Now, the One Last Breath music video, it's a classic music video. The editing is definitely fit for the times, but they're good songs. You had Bullets, you had Hide, also good songs on that album. Then you had the title of the album track, Withered. Not bad. But the thing is, they were riding high off Human Clay. Withered just kept that fire going. And at that time, Creed was a hot commodity. I mean, let's be real here. If you start a band, what's the end game? What's the goal? You want to be great, right? I mean, if I was in a band and I took it serious and the guys around me did as well, the goal is to be the greatest. If you're going to do something, why do you not want to be the greatest? So they have 3 albums under their belt. My Own Prison ended up getting certified 6 times platinum, their first album. Their second album, Human Clay, 11 times platinum, and it was certified diamond. And their third studio album, Withered, was certified 6 times platinum. These guys, whether you like them or not, they dropped 3 hot albums, and there's no debate about that. But, you know, going into 2002, there was about to be a lot of issues, and pretty much all of them were revolving around Scott. You know, one of the really bad things was in 2002 when Creed was doing a show in Chicago. I mean, Scott Stapp was he had substance abuse issues and he had alcohol problems. And that night, when he went on stage to perform in front of the second biggest city in our country, Chicago, Illinois, he went on stage. He was so messed up out of his mind. He was stumbling around the stage. He ended up leaving the stage several times and coming back. And it was obvious to the crowd. It was a huge issue. I mean, how embarrassing do you think the rest of the guys felt that he did this? I mean, it completely ruined the show that night. And how many people spent a lot of money to go see Creed? Because at this time, they were on top of the world. That's the last thing you want to see when you go to see one of your favorite bands, especially when they're as hot as Creed was at that time. To see the lead man, the man that's front and center for the band, the voice of the band, to go out there and just completely ruin the show because he's so freaking obliterated out of his mind. Crazy situation. Actually, you know what? There was another issue earlier in the year of 2002. Scott Stapp was driving around his home state, Florida. He was so drunk, he ended up driving his SUV off the road, crashed it, and he was arrested for reckless driving. He ended up bailing out, and the situation eventually went away. But, you know, that right there was, okay, hindsight. The incident in Chicago happened later in the year. But that incident with the SUV, you know, you look back at it now, and you say, man, that should have been a warning sign, right? But whether it was or not, none of the other guys in the band were getting headlines like Scott was. Well, Scott was having his troubles, but Creed was still together and they were still touring around rocking. They didn't have another incident like what happened in Chicago that night, but, you know, Scott was still having his issues. In 2003, he had another issue where it was an interview I watched on him. He was talking about how he almost killed himself one night. He had suicide on the mind. He was drunk out of his mind. He was just playing some old music, and he actually got a gun out and pointed it at his head. He said what saved his life was he looked at a picture of his son. Now, being a father, for one, okay, mental health is a huge issue in this country, in this world, and I really encourage those out there that have issues to seek help. And if you know somebody, try to reach out and help them any way you can. Me personally, I would never ever talk down to anybody that says that they just feel so bad that they contemplate stuff like that. Me, I feel like I'm very strong-minded. Personally, this is just me. I'm very strong-minded. I would never think like that. It would not cross my mind. There's nothing too bad in this world that you can't fight through. There's nothing. And I myself have been through plenty of tough situations, bad situations, really bad. But that's between me and the people that know about it. Maybe one day I can share some of that stuff with you on this channel. But obviously Scott was going through some stuff. If you're willing to point a gun at your head and you're really contemplating pulling the trigger, you got some stuff going on. But thank God he was able to look at that picture of his son and it changed his mind. But that right there tells you Scott was going down a path of mental issues that sometimes that's when you need to say, okay, I need to think about myself. So 2004, Creed ended up breaking up. And gotta be honest, I'm sure that wasn't something the rest of the guys didn't see coming. Now, Mark Tremonti, the awesome guitarist from Creed, he did an interview where he said that him and Scott were just, the relationship wasn't as tight as it used to be, and he could just feel it. They weren't close anymore. And it was the same way with the rest of the guys in the band. It was just, the connection wasn't there. Now you got to realize, Scott was just taking advantage of that rock star lifestyle. Don't matter if you're a huge rock band that's like on the level of Aerosmith and Kiss, Guns N' Roses, you know, the guys from Motley Crue, you know, going all out. If you're a rock star, you're a rock star. It doesn't matter the style of rock you're playing in. Scott was taking advantage of that. Now, the thing is, they all don't do that. I think of somebody like Foo Fighters, Dave Grohl. He said he's never indulged in drugs. Don't know if that's actually true, but I know one thing is true. He's never got so bad to where it's been, publicly known that this guy is addicted to some sort of substance, and he's went to hell and back. And one of those great stories where the guys almost die, like Nikki Sixx. He did die for a short amount of time. They brought him back, and now it's like a success story. He's able to write a book on it. He's gotten past that and moved on. Also the same thing with Mark Tremonti. He's kind of on that Dave Grohl category. He said he's never really was that bad on drugs or substances. Now, he did a little bit of things here and there, but he was never that bad. So that's going to create that riff. And obviously it did. So the guys were done in Creed. So what is that old lyric from that Semisonic song from the 90s? The classic, was it Closing Time? Every new beginning comes from some of the beginning's end. Creed broke up in 2004 and Alter Bridge was born. The rest of the guys from Creed, minus Scott, Mark Tremonti, Brian Marshall, Scott Phillips, they went on to form a band with Miles Kennedy. And I think Miles Kennedy is a freaking awesome singer. That guy has got some vocal range. They went on to form Alter Bridge, and to this day, Alter Bridge is still rocking out. So it was definitely something good born out of that. Now, Scott went on to do his own thing, but eventually, 2009 rolled around. The guys from Creed got back together. So yeah, that reuniting in 2009 was great to see. The world was happy after a 5-year absence of Creed from this, rock world. They were back again, and they went on and released their 4th studio album, Full Circle. Now, nowhere near the success of their first 3 albums, but it was cool to see the band back together. The 4 guys, the original guys, back together, touring around, rocking out. It was especially good for their fan base. It's good for any fan base if you have a favorite band that breaks up and eventually they can get back together and you get to see them again. It's an awesome feeling. Now, the thing was, they would eventually break up again in 2012. So the breakup in 2012 was nothing like the one in 2004. 2004 was a little nasty and Scott was in a really bad place then, living the rock star life. 2012 wasn't as bad. The guys broke up, they went their separate ways, back to doing what they were doing, working on what they were working on. But 2023, this year, would see Creed reunite once again. The guys are back together. And you know what? Next year in 2024, there's an awesome tour going around the country. It's called the Summer of 99 Tour. Now think about the year 1999. There's some bands on this tour that I guarantee their songs, most of these bands, will take you back to a place and a time that was probably a pretty cool time for you. I know it was for me. 1999 was an awesome year for me. And some of the bands on this tour are Buck Cherry, Fuel, Tonic, Vertical Horizon, Three Doors Down. And the headliner, can you guess it? That's right. Creed's headlining this tour. That's awesome. I'm glad the guys get to do this, and I'm glad a lot of these bands get to go do this tour. All right, so let's go back to the original question. What the hell happened to Creed? Well, I hate to put it bluntly and not on one man's shoulders, but Scott Stapp is what happened to Creed. Unfortunately, it was his actions that made the band break up originally, and it was off of a hot 3rd album, and the guys were on top of the world. So it's not the ideal time you want to break up and dismember a band. But unfortunately, that's what happened, and he was pretty much the reason why. Think about this. Why did the original lineup for Guns N' Roses that was on top of the world doing great things, why'd they break up? It was because of Axl Rose. And that's just what it is. Now, the guys from Guns N' Roses are back out on the road. They're touring. They're making music. Not the original lineup, but some of the key members are there and some of the main members that you think of when you think of their band. Now, when you think of Creed, you're getting all the guys back again. And it's awesome that they get to do the Summer of 99 tour, and hopefully they'll do some more stuff beyond that. But, it just sucks that some people just, you get this opportunity and you just put out there with an abundance of money and an abundance of fame. What do you expect most people to do? The ones that can control themselves, more power to them. That's awesome, and that's a lot of self-control. That's great. Nothing wrong with that. The ones that are just like, hey, man, this is something I can only dream of or could have dreamed of when I was younger and never thought I'd be in this situation, they might go out there and be a little crazy with it. And that's what Scott was doing. And he admitted so in many interviews. He was just living the life, the so-called rock star life. But anyway, that's what happened to Creed. But it doesn't matter because the guy's got a second life. They got a third life. And now they're on their 4th life. But anyway, it doesn't matter. Again, thank you everybody for watching. I enjoyed talking about it. I mean, Creed they were huge when I was in high school. And, you cannot take that away from them. They were on top of the world for a short amount of time. But anyway, give it to the guys. I got a lot of respect for them. Hopefully they'll continue and do great things. But again, thank you for watching, everybody. Have fun. Take care. Till next time, I'm out.